He turned his back on violence and found peace among pots and pans. But when danger walked through the door of his diner, the past came back armed. Now, the man who wanted to forget everything will have to remember who he once was. Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, hit like and subscribe so we can keep bringing you stories like this. A man's life can change so many times that, with time, even the mirror hesitates to recognize him. For years, Nathan Carter had been the kind of person who lived between the lines of the world, a silent operator in conflicts the news preferred. Not to mention, a problem solver who used lethal skills in places where diplomacy had failed. But that was a long time ago. Today he wears a worn cotton apron and waits tables with the calm of a man who chose peace, even if it weighs heavier than any weapon he ever carried. The small town of Santa Fe had become his refuge, a place where no one asked about old scars or eyes that seemed to see too much. The Blue Door Diner sat on the outskirts of town near the main highway, a place where travelers stopped to try the best stuffed chilies and black mole in the region. Margaret Sullivan, a 60-year-old woman with steady hands and kind eyes, was the owner. She had taken Nathan in 3 years ago when he arrived with little more than a backpack and the need to disappear. "I know how to work hard," he'd told her, and she simply nodded, recognizing something familiar in his eyes, the desire to start over. His days were made of simple routines, serving coffee, listening to the same stories from regulars, and wiping counters to the sound of old rancheras on the radio. He didn't complain. In fact, he found something there he'd never had before, a predictable, safe, and quiet routine. On Sundays, when the diner closed early, Nathan would sit on the back porch with Margaret, sharing tequila and watching the sunset in silence. No words were needed. Both understood the value of quiet. Then, one Friday evening, the roar of 6 motorcycles shattered the diner's usual calm. Customers glanced nervously through the windows as the bikes stopped out front. No one recognized them, but everyone felt the unease in their bones. The bikers were young, loud, and aggressive. They walked in like they owned the place, leather, jackets, and swagger in their step. The leader, a tall kid with a tribal tattoo on his neck, scanned the room with a sneer. "What a dump!" he exclaimed, drawing laughter from his friends. They sprawled across the center table, knocking chairs over on purpose, looking around like the place belonged to them. Margaret gave Nathan a look, signaling him to handle them, while she watched warily from the kitchen. Nathan approached the table with his usual calm. "Good evening, what can I get you?" he asked, his voice neutral, notepad in hand. The leader, who would later be identified as Vincent Russo, looked him up and down with contempt. "Bring us 6 beers and make it quick before we get bored of this place," he ordered. As Nathan walked to the bar, he heard mocking comments about his age and his job. He returned with the beers on a tray, carefully placing them on the table. That's when Vincent, with a malicious grin, deliberately pushed a bottle, spilling beer on Nathan's apron. "Oops, how clumsy of me," he said with fake concern. "Get us some food, old man. And hurry, before I lose my patience." The first big revelation for those watching. Nathan said nothing. He simply walked away and grabbed a rag to dry himself. The regulars, who knew his efficiency and kindness, expected an outburst. But he was calm, silent, almost serene. It was that lack of reaction that unsettled them more than any confrontation. In the kitchen, as he cleaned up, he touched the old stainless steel knife used for chopping vegetables. He held it for a moment, like someone testing an old reflex. His fingers remembered the weight of very different tools. Margaret watched him silently. "Are you okay?" she finally asked. Nathan nodded. "Just some kids looking for trouble." "Nothing serious," he replied, though both knew it wasn't entirely true. "I don't want trouble in my diner, Nathan," she said firmly, "and I won't have you disrespected." He gave a faint smile. "Don't worry, Margaret. I learned a long time ago that not every battle is worth fighting." He returned to the dining area with a new tray, this time carrying nachos and guacamole they hadn't ordered. "Compliments of the house," he said as he set them down. Vincent stared at him, confused, as if expecting a different reaction. His friends, however, dug into the food. For the next hour, the bikers ate and drank, growing louder by the minute. They insulted Nathan every time he approached, trying to provoke him. He remained unshaken, serving them with professionalism. When they finally left, they left behind a mess of broken bottles and scattered food, without paying the bill. "We'll be back soon, old man," Vincent shouted from his motorcycle. "We like this place." The regular customers helped clean up. Mr. Johnson, an elderly man who came every afternoon for coffee, approached Nathan as he swept. "You've got patience, kid. If it were me, I'd have smashed their faces in." Nathan smiled. "Violence only brings more violence, Mr. Johnson. Besides, so they're just bored kids." But there was something else in his eyes. Calculation, assessment. It wasn't fear that had stopped him. In the following days, the bikers returned, growing more aggressive each time. They shoved tables, verbally, harassed customers, and always made a point of humiliating Nathan. He endured it, silently. But each visit left marks, not on his body, but in his memory. Old scars seemed to itch beneath his skin, reminding him of who he once was. One afternoon, as he wiped down tables after another visit from the bikers, he overheard Margaret arguing with Vincent at the entrance. He moved closer quietly, ready to step in. "Your little gang is scaring away my customers," she said firmly. "I'm asking you to find somewhere else to have your fun." Vincent leaned into her, invading her space. "What a nice little place you've got here, Mom. It'd be a shame if something happened to it, don't you think?" Nathan heard the words, and something shifted in his gaze. The second revelation, the one who seemed meek, could awaken. That night, after closing the diner, Nathan didn't head to his small room in the back like he usually did. Instead, he stayed observing the establishment from the opposite sidewalk. His eyes, now alert like a predator's, studied every detail. The door locks, the blind spots, the windows. It wasn't fear, it was preparation. His hands, which for 3 years had only served plates and wiped tables, remembered other skills. Skills he had tried to bury under layers of normalcy. Mrs. Margaret found him like that, motionless in the darkness. "What are you doing here at this hour, Nathan?" she asked, startling him. He turned, quickly composing himself. "Just thinking, Ma'am. Nothing important." She stared at him, as if seeing beyond his words. "I know that look. I've seen it before. In my late husband's eyes when he came back from the war. It's the look of someone calculating how to survive." Nathan lowered his gaze. "I don't want trouble for you or your diner." "And who are you to decide that?" she replied with a sad smile. "The trouble is already here, Nathan. The question is how we'll face it." He nodded, recognizing the wisdom in her words. "Do you know anything about those boys?" he finally asked. Mrs. Margaret sighed. "The leader, Vincent Russo, is the son of Anthony Russo, owner of the largest construction company in the region, a family with a lot of power and influence. The others are just followers seeking Vincent's approval." This information shifted something in Nathan's mental strategy. These weren't just thugs, but privileged young men who believed they were above consequences. "Go get some rest, Mom. Tomorrow's another day," he said at last. But both knew something had changed. The next morning, Nathan found Michael, one of the bikers, waiting alone in front of the diner. He was the youngest of the group, barely 18, with an air of insecurity that clashed with his leather jacket and defiant attitude. Nathan approached with measured steps, keeping a safe distance. "The diner isn't open yet," he said calmly. Michael startled. He hadn't expected to run into Nathan so early. I was just passing by," he stammered. Nathan studied him closely. He wasn't like the others. There was fear in his eyes, vulnerability. "If you're looking for work, we might need help in the kitchen," Nathan offered, surprising himself. The young man seemed confused. "Why would you offer me a job after how we've treated you?" Nathan shrugged. "Everyone deserves a second chance." "I can't," Michael replied, glancing around nervously. "Vincent, they wouldn't let me." "Don't come back here with them," Nathan said, his voice firm but not threatening. "This place isn't for you." Something in his tone made Michael step back. It wasn't an empty threat from a scared waiter. It was the warning of someone used to being obeyed. "Vincent won't stop," Michael muttered before hurrying away. That afternoon, as Nathan had anticipated, the bikers returned. This time Vincent had a chain coiled around his fist. His eyes gleamed with malice as they walked into the diner, now nearly empty except for a few loyal customers who refused to abandon Margaret. "Look who's here," Vincent exclaimed when he spotted Nathan. "Our favorite waiter." His companions laughed, surrounding Nathan, who remained unfazed by the bar. "I'm asking you to leave," Nathan said calmly. "This establishment reserves the right to refuse service." Vincent feigned surprise. "Did you hear that? The old man's kicking us out." He stepped forward threateningly. "And who's going to make us? You?" The third revelation came then, when Vincent swung the chain at him. Nathan didn't back down. With a fluid motion, he dodged the strike and gripped Vincent's wrist, applying pressure to a specific point that forced the younger man to drop the chain with a cry of pain. Within seconds, 2 more bikers were on the ground. Nathan moved with a precision that contrasted with his elderly appearance. These weren't the movements of a diner worker, but of someone trained for combat. The customers watched in shock. Nathan didn't seriously hurt them, just immobilized them, like someone who wanted to teach, not destroy. "Leave now," he said, finally releasing Vincent, who stared at him with a mix of fear and fury. "And don't come back." The bikers retreated, confused and humiliated. "This isn't over, old man," Vincent threatened before leaving. "My father will hear about this." The diner fell silent. Mr. Johnson was the first to speak. "Damn, son, where'd you learn to fight like that?" Nathan didn't answer. He simply began picking up the fallen chairs, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But Margaret watched him differently, as if confirming something she'd always suspected. The incident quickly became the talk of Santa Fe. Everyone wanted to know who the waiter really was, the one who had stood up to the Russo gang. Rumors swirled he was a former soldier, an undercover agent, even a protected witness. Nathan ignored the gossip. He stuck to his routine, serving tables, cleaning, living in the present. But now there was a new tension in his shoulders, a constant vigilance. He knew Vincent wouldn't let it slide. A week after the incident, Mrs. Sullivan received an unexpected visit. Anthony Russo, a burly 50-year-old man in an expensive suit with refined manners that couldn't hide his intimidating nature, walked into the diner with his son Vincent. "Mrs. Sullivan," he greeted with false warmth. "I regret we're meeting under these circumstances." Mrs. Sullivan remained impassive. "Mr. Russo, how can I help you?" Anthony smiled, flashing perfect teeth. "My son told me about an unfortunate incident that happened here. I've come to resolve this civilly." He glanced around with disdain. It'd be a shame if such a quaint establishment ran into trouble with health inspectors or tax authorities. You know how inspectors are these days. The threat was clear. Mrs. Sullivan kept her composure. "If you're referring to when your son and his friends threatened my customers and staff, I'm afraid you've only heard half the story." Nathan watched from the kitchen, ready to step in if needed. Anthony leaned forward. "What I have is a son with a bruised wrist and witnesses who will confirm whatever story I choose to tell. What you have is a diner on property that, coincidentally, sits in an area my company plans to develop." His smile widened. "I suggest you fire that waiter of yours before things get messy." Mrs. Sullivan didn't flinch. "This diner belonged to my husband and now it's mine. I won't fire anyone for defending what's ours." Anthony straightened up, surprised by the resistance. "Everyone has a price, Mrs. Sullivan, even you." He headed for the exit but added before leaving, "Think it over. I'll give you a few days." When the Russos were gone, Nathan stepped out of the kitchen. "You should do as he says," he suggested tensely. "I'll find work somewhere else." Margaret shook her head firmly. "You're not running, Nathan. Neither of us is." He looked at her, moved by her determination. "It's dangerous to stand up to someone like Russo." "Since when are you afraid of danger?" she shot back with a defiant smile. "Whoever you were before, Nathan Carter, now you're part of my family, and family sticks together." The fourth revelation. Nathan Carter, the quiet man who waited tables with quiet efficiency, had found something worth fighting for again. The following days passed in apparent calm. The diner gradually regained its regular customers, and even new faces appeared, drawn by rumors of the waiter who'd stood up to the Russo gang. Nathan kept to his routine, though he remained more alert now. He watched every unfamiliar face that walked in, assessed every situation. His old instincts, dormant for years, had fully awakened. One afternoon, as Nathan wiped down tables, a woman walked in who immediately caught his attention. It wasn't her beauty that alerted him, though she was undeniably striking, but the way she scanned the room as she entered, methodical, professional, checking exits and evaluating threats. Exactly as he would have done. She sat at a corner table with a clear view of the entire space. When Nathan approached to take her order, their eyes met with mutual recognition. "Black coffee, please," she said with an accent that wasn't local. "It's been a while, Nathan." He kept his expression neutral, though his pulse quickened. "I'm afraid we haven't met, ma'am." She smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Always so careful. "I'm Olivia Grant, and we both know we're very familiar with each other." Nathan poured the coffee in silence, weighing his options. Olivia Grant, a name that belonged to another life, to missions in countries that didn't even appear on tourist maps. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his voice low. "I'm not here by chance," she replied, taking a sip of coffee. "They've been looking for you, Nathan. A situation has come up. They need your expertise." Nathan tensed. "That life is over for me." "It's never over. You know that better than anyone." Olivia left a bill on the table. "I'll be at the Grand Hotel tonight. Room 212. There's something you need to know, something related to your last job in South America." She stood gracefully. "This isn't just about you, Nathan. Lives are at stake." When Olivia left, Nathan remained still, trying to process what had just happened. His past, which he'd run from for 3 years, had finally caught up to him, and the worst part was he was curious. That night, after closing the diner, Nathan walked to the Grand Hotel, a renovated colonial building in the heart of Santa Fe. He had no intention of returning to his old life, but he needed to know what threat Olivia might pose. Room 212 was at the end of a hallway decorated with local crafts. Nathan knocked softly. Olivia opened the door almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting for him. They didn't exchange greetings. "Diego Alvarez is alive," she said without preamble. The name landed like a stone in Nathan's gut. Diego Alvarez had been the target of his last mission, a man whose actions had cost countless lives. The operation had gone wrong. Civilians were hurt. That was when Nathan decided to disappear. "It's impossible," he muttered. "I saw him fall. Myself." "What you saw was what he wanted you to see." Olivia spread a series of photos across the bed. "He's been operating from the shadows, rebuilding his network, and now he knows you're here." The fifth revelation: the danger wasn't just from the Russos. How did he find me? Rumors about a waiter who took down 5 men reached Los Angeles. "Someone recognized your style." Olivia stared at him intently. "You have to come with me, Nathan. You're in danger, and you're putting everyone around you at risk." Nathan thought of Margaret, the diner, the peace he'd found. "I can't just leave like this. I have commitments here." "Commitments?" Olivia laughed dryly. "A job as a waiter. Is that more important than the lives Alvarez will destroy if we don't stop him?" "I'm not the same person you knew," Nathan replied firmly. "They'll find someone else." Olivia shook her head. "You were always the best, Nathan. The most precise, the most efficient. If anyone can finish this, it's you." He handed him a card with a number. "Think about it. I'll give you 3 days." Nathan left the hotel with his mind in chaos. The mention of Diego Alvarez had awakened memories he thought were buried. The smell of gunpowder, distant screams, decisions made in split seconds that determined who lived and who died. The next day, Margaret noticed his distraction. "Is something wrong, Nathan?" she asked as they prepared the diner to open. "You seem worried." He shook his head. "Just tired, ma'am." But she knew him too well. "It's about that woman who came yesterday, isn't it? The one from the city. She recognized you." Nathan looked at her, surprised. Margaret smiled. "I have eyes. Boy, I saw how you looked at each other, like old acquaintances or enemies." "It's complicated," he finally admitted. "My past, the things I did." "We all have a past, Nathan," she interrupted gently. "What matters is what we do with our present." Before he could respond, the diner door swung open violently. 3 men Nathan had never seen before walked in, but he recognized their type. Immediately, Mercenary's professionals. They weren't here to eat. "Nathan Carter?" asked the taller one, though he clearly already knew the answer. "The restaurant is closed," Nathan replied, instinctively positioning himself between the men and Mrs. Margaret Sullivan. "We're not here to eat," the man confirmed. "Diego Alvarez sends his regards." It all happened in seconds. The first man pulled a gun, but Nathan was already moving. With calculated precision, he used a metal tray to deflect the armed hand, then struck specific pressure points to immobilize the attacker. The other 2 lunged at him. It was obvious they had training too, but Nathan had decades of experience. He used the environment to his advantage. Chairs, tables, even bottles of hot sauce became weapons in his hands. In less than a minute, all 3 men were incapacitated on the floor. Nathan was barely breathing heavily. Mrs. Sullivan watched. From the kitchen, her eyes wide but without panic. "Call the police," Nathan instructed, tying the men up with kitchen ropes. "Tell them they tried to rob the restaurant." He turned to her, expecting fear or rejection. Instead, he found understanding. "Who are you really, Nathan Carter?" she asked, softly. The 6th revelation came then. It was time for the truth. "I was a government operative," he explained, choosing his words carefully. "I worked on missions that officially never existed, until one went wrong. There were innocent people affected. I couldn't continue after that." Mrs. Sullivan nodded as if she'd always known. "And now these men are after you because of that?" "Not exactly. The man I was supposed to... The target from my last mission is alive, and apparently knows I'm here." He looked at the unconscious men. "This is just the beginning. More will come. I should leave, Mrs. Margaret, for your safety." She stepped closer, and to Nathan's surprise firmly took his hand. "My husband, God rest his soul, always said you don't run from problems. You face them. This diner is our home, Nathan. I won't let anyone take it from us." "You don't understand the danger," he insisted. "These people, they're not like the Russos, they're professionals. And so are you," she replied with a confident smile. "Besides, you won't be alone." When the police arrived, the attempted robbery story was accepted without question. The 3 men, who had criminal records and warrants in several states, were arrested. The police chief, Chief Robert Harris, an honest man in a system that wasn't always, stayed behind to talk with Nathan. "These aren't common thieves," he remarked, studying Nathan curiously. "Is there something I should know?" "Carter," Nathan kept his composure. "They just picked the wrong place to rob." Chief Harris nodded slowly. "My brother was in the army. I recognize a trained man when I see one. I don't know who you were before coming here, and I don't care. But if there's trouble that could affect this community, I need to know." It was a fair offer. Nathan considered his options. "There could be more men like these," he finally admitted. "They're not looking for the diner. They're looking for me." "Why?" "Because of something that happened a long time ago." Chief Robert Harris stared at him. "This is a quiet town, Carter. I'd like to keep it that way." "So would I." The officer handed him a card. "If you need help, call me." After everyone had left, Nathan and Margaret Sullivan sat in silence in the empty diner. "I should explain everything to you," he said at last. "You deserve to know what you're getting into." She poured 2 glasses of tequila. "We have all night." And so Nathan Carter began to tell his story, or at least the parts he could share. He spoke of an idealistic young man who wanted to serve his country, of missions in hostile territories, of impossible decisions made in critical moments. He spoke of Diego Alvarez, a man whose influence brought suffering to countless innocents, and he spoke of his last job, the one that went wrong, the one that led him to seek redemption in a small, roadside diner. With every word, He felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. The seventh revelation. Sometimes the truth is the best shield. The next morning dawned with a deceptive calm. Nathan had slept little, keeping watch over the diner from his room. In the back. Now as he prepped the place to open, every movement on the street caught his attention. He could no longer afford to let his guard down, not with Diego Alvarez hunting him, not with the Russo brothers lurking. He was at a crossroads, trapped between two different but equally dangerous threats. Margaret stepped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. At 60, she carried a strength Nathan deeply admired. "I've been thinking," she said, gazing at the empty diner. "Maybe we should close for a few days, until things calm down." Nathan shook his head. Closing would show weakness. Both Alvarez and Russo would take it as fear. "And you're not afraid?" she asked curiously. He smiled slightly. "Fear is useful when it keeps you alert. It's dangerous when it paralyzes you." Margaret laughed softly. "You sound like my Louis, Mayhe." "Rest in peace. He was a warrior too in his own way." She placed a firm hand on Nathan's shoulder. "Well, if we're going to fight, we'll do it together. But we need a plan." This woman's determination never ceased to amaze him. "I have a few ideas," he replied thoughtfully. The doorbell chimed, interrupting their conversation. Michael, the youngest of the bikers, entered nervously. He looked different. No leather jacket, no defiant attitude. Just a scared kid. "I need to talk to you," he said, addressing Nathan. Margaret exchanged a glance with Nathan before discreetly retreating to the kitchen, leaving them alone. "Sit down," Nathan offered, pointing to a table. Michael sat, anxiously, fidgeting with a salt shaker. "Vincent is furious," he began. "His father has hired some professionals. They're not like us." Nathan remained impassive. "Why are you telling me this?" The young man seemed to struggle with himself before answering. "Because this is getting out of control. We just wanted to have fun, scare people, but now he left the sentence unfinished." "Now what?" pressed Nathan. "I heard Mr. Russo talking to those men. They don't just want to scare you or Mrs. Sullivan. They want the land where the diner is. They plan to build a shopping center here." The pieces were starting to fall into place. This wasn't just about wounded pride. It was a calculated plan. "Why are you helping me, Michael?" The young man looked up. "My mother worked for the Sullivans for years before she got sick. Mrs. Sullivan paid for her treatments when no one else would. I can't be part of this." It was the first genuine revelation of the day. Even in darkness, unexpected allies could be found. "Thanks for the information," said Nathan, offering him a coffee. "What do you plan to do now?" Michael took a sip, thoughtful. "I can't go back to Vincent. He'd know I came here." "The job offer still stands," said Nathan, surprising even. "Oh, himself." "The kitchen always needs help." Michael's expression brightened momentarily before darkening again. "I can't stay in Santa Fe. It wouldn't be safe." Nathan nodded understandingly. "I know people in Santa Fe. They could help you start fresh." He wrote a name and address on a napkin. "Mention my name. They'll give you work and a place to stay." Michael took the napkin with trembling hands. "Why are you helping me after everything we did?" Nathan looked out the window, toward the highway stretching like a promise of escape. "Because everyone deserves a second chance. I got mine." After Michael left, Nathan informed Margaret Sullivan about what he'd discovered. She listened, with a grim expression. "Anthony Russo has been trying to buy this property for years," she confirmed. "Louis always refused to sell, and I've held that line. This place isn't just a diner, it's our legacy." "Now we have two problems," murmured Nathan. "Russo and Alvarez." "Three if we count that woman, Olivia," corrected Margaret with a sharpness that drew a smile from Nathan. "She's not an enemy," he clarified. "It's complicated." "Women always are," she replied with a knowing smile. "Do you trust her?" Nathan considered the question. Olivia and he had shared missions, dangers, even a brief personal history. But loyalties in their old world were fluid, shaped by objectives more than relationships. "I trust her motives are genuine," he finally answered, "but her methods may not align with my current interests." "You sound like a diplomat," Margaret laughed. If we're going to face this, we need allies, even the complicated ones. He was right, of course. Nathan needed resources, information, and potentially backup. That night, after closing, he visited the Grand Hotel again. Olivia greeted him with an expression that mixed relief and worry. "I heard about the incident at the diner," she said, letting him in. "3 of Alvarez's men. You were efficient, as always." "I didn't come to take the job back," Nathan clarified immediately. "I came to negotiate." Olivia arched an eyebrow, intrigued. "Negotiate what exactly?" "Protection," he replied, "for Margaret and her diner. In exchange, I'll help you with Alvarez." Olivia's expression hardened. "You're in no position to set conditions, Nathan. The agency wants you back for a specific reason, not to protect some small-town diner." "Then I'll handle it alone," he answered, heading for the door. "Wait," Olivia relented, sighing. "I'll see what I can do, but I'm not making any promises." It was a start. Meanwhile, Nathan needed to deal with the Russos. The next day, dressed in a borrowed suit and a confidence he didn't feel, he visited the office of Chief Robert Harris, the police chief. "I need information about Anthony Russo," he explained, "specifically about his real estate projects." Chief Harris looked at him curiously. "Why is a waiter interested in Russo's business?" "Because your businesses include tearing down the place where I work," Nathan replied honestly. The officer nodded slowly. "Russo has influence, but he's not untouchable. There have been irregularities in his construction permits. Nothing we've been able to prove." "What if you had proof?" Nathan suggested. Chief Harris leaned forward, intrigued. "Go on." For the next hour, Nathan and Chief Harris devised a plan that combined the former's intelligence expertise with the latter's legal knowledge. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it would buy them time. Time Nathan desperately needed. Back at the diner, he found Margaret Sullivan chatting animatedly with Olivia, who seemed to have decided to visit on her own. The two women, so different, in age and experience, shared coffee and what appeared to be amusing stories. "Nathan," Margaret greeted with a knowing smile. "Your friend Olivia was telling us about her work in... what did you call it, dear?" "International security consulting," Olivia replied with a professional smile Nathan knew well. It was the same smile she used right before lying outright to targets and contacts. "Fascinating," Margaret remarked. "Though I suspect there's more to that story than you're telling us." Olivia laughed, genuinely surprised by the older woman's insight. "I like her, Nathan," she said, turning to him. "I see why you protect her." Nathan stayed silent, assessing the situation. Margaret and Olivia together was a combination he hadn't anticipated. "I have news," he finally announced. He told them about his conversation with Chief Harris, the plan to gather evidence against Russo, and the chance to buy time. "It's a good start," Olivia approved, "but Alvarez is a more immediate problem. My sources indicate he's moving. Resources to Santa Fe. He won't come personally, but he'll send his best men." "How much time do we have?" asked Nathan. 2 days, 3 at most." The tension in the room was palpable. "Then we have to work fast," declared Mrs. Margaret with surprising determination. "What's the plan?" Nathan exchanged a glance with Olivia. Both knew involving Mrs. Margaret in the operational details would put her in unnecessary danger. "The plan is to keep you safe," Nathan replied firmly, "which means you need to leave here temporarily." As expected, Mrs. Margaret dismissed the idea immediately. "This is my home, Nathan. I won't run." "I'm not asking you to run," he clarified gently. "I'm asking you to let me do my job without worrying about your safety." The woman's expression softened. "And what exactly is that job, Nathan Carter?" It was the question he'd been avoiding, the one that demanded a full and honest answer. The moment of truth. It was time to accept who he really was. I am a high-level operative," he explained, searching for the right words. "My specialty was neutralizing threats that couldn't be handled through conventional channels. Diego Alvarez was one of those threats." Olivia nodded, silently confirming his account. "The mission went wrong," Nathan continued. "There were unintended consequences. Civilians were injured. After that, I couldn't go on. I disappeared. I built a new life here." "And now this man, Alvarez, has found you?" asked Mrs. Sullivan. "Yes, and he won't stop until he eliminates me." The older woman considered him in silence. "And do you plan to do the same to him?" Nathan didn't answer right away. It was a question he'd been asking himself. "I plan to stop him," he said finally, "whatever it takes." Mrs. Sullivan nodded, as if she'd reached a decision. "Very well. I'll help you your way." She stood with dignity. "I have a sister in Tucson. I'll visit her for a few days." The relief Nathan felt was immense. "Thank you, Ma'am. But on one condition," she added, raising a finger. "When this is over, I want both of you to come back. This diner, this life you've built, it's real, Nathan. It's no less valuable than the one you left behind." Her words resonated deeply with him. For 3 years, he'd been living in limbo, caught between his past and a future he didn't dare fully claim. Now, facing the possibility of losing everything, he realized just how much he valued this new life. "I promise," he said sincerely. That night, after making sure Mrs. Margaret Sullivan had safely left for Tucson, Nathan and Olivia were alone in the diner, planning. The closed establishment, with its dim lights, looked like a completely different space. "The agency has accepted your terms," Olivia informed him, spreading a map of the area on the table. "Protection for Mrs. Margaret and her property, in exchange for your cooperation in capturing Alvarez." "Capturing?" Nathan questioned, raising an eyebrow. "Not eliminating." Olivia smiled enigmatically. "Times change, Nathan. Now we value the intel we can get from figures like Alvarez more." "Convenient," he murmured, not entirely buying it. He knew the agency's real priorities all too well. "What's the plan?" "Simple," she replied, pointing to specific spots on the map. "We'll use this place as bait. Alvarez knows you're here. His men will come and we'll be waiting." Dawn found Nathan and Olivia transforming the diner into an improvised fortress. They moved tables to create strategic barricades, secured back doors, and established clear lines of sight to all entrances. To a casual observer, it might look like simple prep for a renovation. To a trained eye, it was a battlefield taking shape. "This reminds me of Miami," Olivia remarked, checking a message on her specialized phone, "though we had better gear there." Nathan nodded, remembering the mission. It had been one of their first jobs together, an operation that went south fast, but thanks to meticulous prep, ended successfully. "In Miami we had backup," he replied. "Here it's just us." Olivia gave him a meaningful look. "Not exactly." The main door swung open, revealing Chief Robert Harris accompanied by 2 trusted officers. The police chief was dressed in civilian clothes, not his usual uniform. "Mr. Carter," he greeted formally, "or whatever your real name is." Nathan exchanged a worried glance with Olivia. They hadn't planned to involve the local police in this operation. "Chief Harris," he replied cautiously, "this isn't what it looks like." The officer let out a short laugh. "Isn't this an operation to capture an international criminal using this diner as a decoy? Because that's exactly what it looks like." At their surprised expressions, he added, "Before I was a cop in this town, I served 20 years in the feds. I recognize a covert op when I see one." He moved to the central table where their blueprints were spread out. "Besides, your friend Olivia visited the station this morning. We've been coordinating." Olivia shrugged under Nathan's accusatory stare. "We needed local backup. Chief Harris has jurisdiction and resources. And I have a personal stake in this ending well," the officer added. "Santa Fe is my city. I won't let it become a battleground for criminals, foreign or local." He was an unexpected but valuable ally. With Chief Harris's experience, they refined the plan. The police would set up a discreet perimeter, allowing Mendoza's men to approach the diner without suspecting the trap. Once inside, Olivia and Nathan would neutralize them while the officers cut off escape routes. "There's another matter," Chief Harris mentioned as they finished reviewing the details. "Anthony Russo. Based on the intel you provided, we got a warrant to inspect his financial records." A satisfied smile crossed his face. We found enough irregularities to launch a formal investigation. He'll be tied up with lawyers for a long time. It was a small but significant victory. With Rousseau temporarily sidelined, one of the threats to Margaret Sullivan and her diner had been significantly reduced. As the day progressed, Olivia's reports confirmed her suspicions. A group of Mendoza's operatives had been spotted entering Santa Fe. They traveled in separate vehicles, trying to stay unnoticed. Professionals like the previous ones, but in greater numbers. "It's almost time," Olivia murmured, discreetly checking her weapon. Nathan felt the familiar tension before an operation, that mix of absolute focus and outward calm he had perfected over decades. But this time it was different. He wasn't fighting for some abstract concept like national security or following orders without question. He was defending something tangible, something that mattered to him personally. The diner, Margaret, the life he'd built. "What's on your mind?" Olivia asked, noticing his distraction. "How motivations change," he answered honestly. "Before, I fought because it was my job. Now I fight because I have something to protect." Olivia studied him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. "You were always different, Nathan. Even in the worst moments, you never lost your humanity." He was about to respond when his phone vibrated. The first suspicious vehicle had been spotted on the main road, approaching the diner. It was time. The next few minutes passed with the tense calm before the storm. Nathan played his role as a waiter, cleaning tables like any ordinary day. Olivia positioned herself at a corner table, pretending to be a regular customer. Chief Harris and his men hid strategically, one in the kitchen, another in the storage room, the third in a parked car across the street. The first man walked in, casually ordered coffee, and sat near the window, observant, assessing. Nathan recognized him immediately as a scout, someone sent to confirm the target and evaluate the situation before the main team struck. He served the coffee normally, noting the slight bulge under the jacket that betrayed a weapon. 10 minutes later, 2 more entered, sitting at separate tables. The trap was set. The decisive moment came when a 4th man walked in, more confident than the others. Nathan recognized him, Jason Reyes, Mendoza's trusted lieutenant, a man with a reputation for efficient brutality. Reyes looked directly at him, no longer pretending to be just another customer. "Nathan Carter," he greeted with a cold smile. "Or should I say, Colonel Carter. It's been a long time." "Not long enough," Nathan replied, holding his position behind the bar. "Your boss didn't come himself. What a disappointment." Reyes let out a short laugh. "Mr. Alvarez sends his regards. He says he still feels the impact of your bullet in his shoulder." The other men were already in position, subtly closing off escape routes. "Do you know why I'm here?" Reyes continued. "To finish what you started." "Or to die trying," Nathan answered calmly. That was the signal. In one fluid motion, Olivia took down the man closest to her with a precise strike. At the same time, Nathan flung the rag he was holding into Reyes's face, distracting him just long enough to vault over the bar and tackle him before he could draw his weapon. The other 2 men reacted quickly, but Chief Robert Harris and his officers emerged from their hiding spots, guns drawn. "Police, freeze," he ordered with authority. One of the men tried to resist. It was a mistake. Olivia locked him in a hold that knocked him unconscious in seconds. The other, wiser, raised his hands in surrender. In less than a minute, the situation was under control. Reyes, pinned beneath. Nathan glared at him with hatred. "This isn't over," he threatened. "Alvarez never forgets." "I hope not," Nathan replied, "because I want him to remember exactly what happened today. I want him to know I came for him once, and I can do it again." He leaned in closer, his voice barely audible. "But I won't do it if he leaves me alone. This is my offer, Reyes, a truce. I don't go after him, he doesn't come after me. We both go on with our lives." Reyes studied him skeptically. "You think Alvarez would accept that? After what you did?" "I think he's a practical man," Nathan replied. "And a practical man knows when the cost outweighs the benefit." Olivia stepped closer, catching the tail end of the conversation. The offer has official backing, she added, briefly flashing her badge at Reyes. Your boss will understand the implications. Reyes narrowed his eyes, weighing his options. Finally, he gave a slight nod. I'll deliver the message. As Chief Harris and his men led the detainees away, Nathan and Olivia were left alone in the partially destroyed diner from the brief confrontation. You think it'll work? She asked, holstering her weapon. The truce? Nathan surveyed the damage, mentally calculating repair costs. It's our best-case scenario. Alvarez is many things, but he's not stupid. If he realizes the agency's involved, he'll think carefully about his next move. Olivia watched him curiously. You talk like you don't plan on coming back. I'm not, he confirmed. My place is here now. She nodded slowly, as if she'd expected that answer. The agency won't be happy, but I suppose they can live with it, given the circumstances. She moved closer to him, closing the professional distance they had maintained until now. You were always the best of us, Nathan. Too good for that job, really. Not good enough, he corrected, thinking about his last failed assignment, the unintended consequences. Or maybe just human, she suggested with a melancholic smile. There are others who could benefit from your experience, you know. Young agents who need to learn that rules and compassion aren't mutually exclusive. Nathan looked at her in surprise. Are you offering me a job as an instructor? I'm offering you options, she clarified. When you're ready, if you ever are. She handed him a card with a different number than before. No pressure, no expectations. It was an unexpected gesture, an acknowledgement of his autonomy that the agency rarely offered. I'll think about it, he promised, pocketing the card. The following days were about rebuilding, with the threat of Diego Alvarez seemingly neutralized and Anthony Russo facing legal investigations. Nathan could focus on repairing the damage to the diner. Chief Robert Harris provided an official explanation for the events, a thwarted robbery attempt, nothing more. The local community, far from being scared, came together to help. Neighbors who had never interacted much with the quiet waiter now greeted him with respect, offering assistance with repairs. When Margaret Sullivan returned from Tucson, she found her diner transformed. Broken tables had been replaced, walls freshly painted, and a new energy filled the place. Looks like you managed just fine without me, she remarked with a smile, watching Nathan direct a group of volunteers installing a new counter. I had help, he replied, gesturing to the gathered community. A lot of help. Margaret studied his face carefully. You look different, more present. It was a perceptive observation. Since the confrontation with Alvarez's men, Nathan had felt an internal shift. The constant vigilance, the feeling of always being on alert to flee had diminished. For the first time in years, he felt rooted. I feel different, he admitted, like I can finally stay. She nodded understandingly. And your friend Olivia? She left yesterday, he replied, remembering their goodbye. It hadn't been emotional, neither of them was like that, but there had been a sense of finality they both recognized. She had unfinished business in the capital. Will she be back? Nathan considered the question. Maybe. Someday. 2. Weeks after the incidents, with the diner fully restored and running normally, Nathan and Mrs. Sullivan shared a quiet afternoon on the back porch. The sun set over the mountains of New Mexico, painting the sky in oranges and purples. I've been thinking, she began, pouring 2 glasses of mezcal. This place it's special, but it could be more. Nathan looked at her curiously. What do you have in mind? An expansion, she explained, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. Not just a roadside diner, but a real community hub, with live music. On weekends, traditional cooking classes, a space where the town's elders can gather. Her passion was contagious. Sounds like a great project, Nathan remarked. I'd need a partner to make it happen, she continued, looking at him meaningfully. Someone with vision, someone who values tradition as much as innovation. The offer was unspoken but clear. Are you sure? He asked, genuinely surprised. After everything that's happened? Precisely because of everything that's happened, she interrupted firmly. You've protected this place as if it were your own. Now it's time for it to truly be yours. It was the ninth revelation, the most shocking of all. After years of wandering, of existing on the margins, someone was offering him roots, a home, a true sense of belonging. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, moved as rarely in his life. "Say yes," she suggested simply, "and then help me plan our new beginning." 3 months later, the Blue Door Diner had been transformed. While keeping its traditional essence, the space had expanded to include a music area, a community room, and a larger kitchen where Oaxacan cooking classes were offered. Nathan and Mrs. Margaret worked side by side, complementing each other perfectly, she with her deep knowledge of local traditions, he with his organizational efficiency and global perspective. On Sunday afternoons, the diner filled with mariachi, music, the laughter of elders playing dominoes, and the aroma of freshly prepared mole. To many people's surprise, Anthony Russo had shifted his focus after his legal troubles. In an unexpected gesture of reconciliation, or perhaps calculated public relations, he had donated materials for the diner's renovation. His son Vincent hadn't been seen in Santa Fe again, apparently sent to study abroad. As for Alvarez, nothing had been heard from him or his men. The truce, it seemed, held. Occasionally, Nathan received cryptic messages from Olivia, professional updates disguised as casual greetings. He never responded, but appreciated the gesture. His past hadn't disappeared, it never would, but it no longer dominated his present. One particularly busy afternoon, as he efficiently served tables, Nathan paused for a moment, observing the diner full of life. Mrs. Margaret was teaching a group of tourists how to make tortillas by hand. Mr. Johnson was telling stories of the revolution to young people who, for the first time, seemed genuinely interested. In a corner, an elderly couple danced slowly to the sound of a guitar. It was a simple scene, even mundane, but for Nathan it represented something extraordinary: peace. Not the absence of conflict, that was too narrow a definition, but the presence of something deeper: belonging. Purpose. The 10th and final revelation. A man who had spent decades moving pieces on the global board had finally found his place in the world. Not as a shadow among shadows, but as a vital part of a community. An ordinary man with ordinary worries and extraordinarily simple joys. Margaret Sullivan called him from the kitchen, interrupting his thoughts. "Nathan, we need more sauce." "For table 7. He smiled, tucking away the napkin where he'd been scribbling ideas for another expansion of the diner. "Coming right away, ma'am," he replied, weaving nimbly through the crowded tables. This was his place now. And for the first time in his life, he had no plans to leave. Dear listeners, we hope Nathan Carter's story has moved you. His journey from the shadows to finding a true home in Santa Fe reminds us that we all deserve a second chance. To follow this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about redemption and new beginnings. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore life's complexities and the transformative power of forgiveness. And community. What would you do in Nathan's place? Do you believe everyone deserves a second chance no matter their past? Join us in the comments to continue this reflection.